Nothing like a little Zoom link excitement for the afternoon, right, everybody?
Wouldn't be a Thursday with before a holiday weekend, right? If that weren't the case. Well, thank you for your patience.
Hi there. The only reason you didn't hear from me is because I called Miss Lisa immediately. I said, what did I do?
Excellent. Well, thanks to Erica. She notified me as well. So I tried to get it updated as quickly as possible for everybody.
Yeah. How are you doing? Good.
Good. How about you?
All right.
I'm just grateful it's Friday Eve.
Yes.
Wednesday is Friday Eve, like all revolves around that day, right?
What do you think happened with the link?
You know, what we've discovered, and I think we've experienced it here at the UG before too, is that anytime Zoom does an update, like you don't even necessarily know they're doing an update, it just runs on its own. But anytime Zoom does an update, it messes up any links that were made prior to the update is what we think we have discovered here at the normal job office, because we've had that issue before too with recurring meetings. Like it works every week, no problem. And then one week it's just not working in our IS.
Wow. So you kind of have to
update.
Well, you can't send them out reoccurring. You have to be careful about that.
Hopefully that's a bug they'll fix so that we we don't have to deal with that going forward. Well, team, shall we sally forth and get started with our discussion? So especially since we lost a few minutes to our little episode. I think if I remember that Lisa maybe is not going to be with us today, so I don't know. I can just call a roll. I'm perfectly competent to do so, but if somebody from staff maybe wants to mark down that we're all here, I don't know who keeps like the notes of this situation since she's not with us.
Right.
I guess it's because it's being recorded, so we can go back and look at it, right? So
yeah.
Commissioner Markley, I'm here. Commissioner Bynum.
Here.
Commissioner Davis.
Present.
Commissioner McKiernan.
Here.
And Commissioner Townsend.
I am here.
You actually only need to call roll for the elected officials, just so you know.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. One less thing.
Lisa adds on everybody. So.
Okay, good deal. So the first thing we wanted to talk about today is just to do a little follow-up from our workshop. This is the first time we've met since we had our workshop with the public. And so I think that Ashley maybe put together a little update because we did some surveys during that workshop. So Ashley pulled together, she told me the data from that survey. So Ashley, if you want to do that little bit of update, and then we can just have a little discussion on how folks thought it went and what they thought was good to bring back to the committee.
Yes, and oddly enough, I don't seem to be able to share my screen for some reason. So I'm going to see if I can quickly fix that setting here. So maybe we could start with you all, because I, as you know, was unable to attend because I was sick. So I would love to kind of get some initial thoughts and feedback from each of you as I try to figure out how to make this a shareable presentation in the back.
All right, so you work on that. Yeah, and we'll just have a few minutes here of discussion. I mean, I think it went really well. And I think especially for sort of our first experiment as a unified government in having sort of a hybrid workshop, I thought everybody was really engaged. We didn't realize how long it was going to take to put everybody into rooms. So that was the only maybe hiccup, is people were like, but I'm still in the main room. And we were like, we're getting there. So that took a little longer than we anticipated. So next time, if we're going to do it the same way, I would just say, let's send people to rooms randomly and tell them to be grown-ups and pick somebody to take the notes. And that way we could just hit the random button and not have to go through that process. But if any other wants to express just thoughts on how it went in general, you jump in with that.
I think it went very well. I think your intro was great. I did like the virtual aspect of it. And I don't know how it went in the room, but I found virtually it was easy to see everybody. They were identified, and you could kind of go boom, 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 with the hands and all that. Probably the only thing that I would do differently, I'd put a time clock on them, because we had one person who was so engaged. She was new, I think, to the area. And I mean, she barely took a breath, and I was trying to get the right time to interject. And then one of the ladies chatted and says something to the effect, she needs to do that on her own time or we can start it. And it's like, now that's kind of a bad thing that people can express that publicly, but people did seem to be engaged. And I would put a clock on it, because once you said we're going back, or the announcement was, wait, we're going back to full session, that didn't take long. I was trying to do a time. So,
Right.
I'd have to keep better, time of when we're going to cut it off or whatever is being done. But I thought it went well after I came to myself after passing out. When I thought I was going to have to be, the moderator, because I've seen people do that very well. But I think what really helped was the virtual aspect of it. So I thought it was well done, team.
Yeah, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Ashley, your department did an incredible job. I cannot praise you all enough, because that is not an easy process, but it was very accessible. I think the virtual component made it to where, our constituents, they had multiple options. I know we're kind of moving back to getting in person, so it's also really exciting, but I think we are moving towards the modern day and perhaps the future, if I dare may say, if we can really I don't even want to say perfect, but just keep adding more and more improvements to the hybrid option, because I truly, truly believe that's where we're going to get the maximum amount of engagement. And so, in my group, it was very well received. I second what Commissioner Townsend said, probably having a timer just would have helped. But I mean, it was a great turnout, great discussion. I would hope this would be the floor and the bare minimum that we do going forward, that this kind of reestablishes, this is a standard. If we don't do it this way, we're not doing it right, because we've proven we can do it good one time. We need to try to replicate it as much as possible. Awesome job to you and your department.
Yeah. Hey, can I just also, agree with Commissioner Davis. So, we tried to do this public hearing kind of set up last year, but it didn't work. This was great. This was fantastic. And we could just hand it to Ashley for the whole setting it all up and planning it. Boy, 90 people participating. It's amazing. So, and by the way, Ashley and I wanted to do that for the budget public hearing, but there just wasn't enough time. Logistically, it wasn't going to work, because we would have to move it over to the Memorial Hall, and wasn't ready. So
we're going to do the dot talks though,
we're
starting
gonna
on
do dot
Wednesday
instead. So yeah, but we just got that public hearing out of the way because it's legally required. But the dot is what's going to cover that, Commissioner. Anyway, I think Commissioner Bynum wanted to comment.
Yep, Commissioner Bynum.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just wanted to say I thought it was really well done also. And I attended in person and appreciated the hybrid aspect of it, and did enjoy very much my in-person group. And they were very engaged. They were very certain of what they believed the needs to be. And it was so interesting to me the way as the groups reported out, we sort of had a top four. And I thought that was interesting, such a diverse group of people. And yet everybody's kind of recognizing these things are critical, especially COVID related and coming out of COVID. So thanks again to the staff. You really did. Commissioner Davis is correct. You really did a very nice job pulling that together. So thanks a bunch.
So speaking of top 4, Ashley, have you had any success?
Yes, I
All right.
have. I have it magically popped up. So super excited when that happens. So I have spent a little bit of time going through some of the surveys. So as you may recall, we started off with a survey at the beginning of the workshop, and then we circled back with everybody at the end of the workshop because I find that conversation with your community members and fellow neighbors can really help kind of evolve your thinking about what's important or what's a key priority because you get a chance to hear from other perspectives. There is considerably more work being done on analyzing kind of the full scope of feedback and input that we've gotten. So that I will be presenting to you very quickly. So we had quite a bit of interesting feedback. And I think just to kind of give you some high level points based on what the first round of survey questions showed is housing is consistently throughout the entire conversation without much of a delta at all was the number 1 challenge and priority for funding. So that is something that I think we heard loud and clear. And I think where it was interesting was looking at kind of what came in second, and actually behavioral health, mental health, as well as employment opportunities were the other 2 most significant challenges that were identified. So just to kind of walk you through quickly what this graphic is showing you, the blue is kind of what survey respondents online said as their challenges versus the in-person. So there is actually some pretty good consistency here, not too much of a deviation, although there are some places where when you are in person, you have the ability to handwrite your response. And so we had a couple people add childcare that was not included on that list. So I think that's something just to note. And then this question looks at the top priority. And so again, this is where top issue, facing the community. And this is where the ability to maintain housing was a big issue. So the only difference, and I apologize, I'm realizing now that when I was replacing all these images, I replaced them on the wrong page. But when you look at the top challenges at the online housing and economic opportunity, number 1 and number 2, utilities came up as a key issue for the online participants, and mental health came up online for the in-person. So slight difference there in terms of who our audience is. And I think this was an interesting question. It was asking people to trust us by sharing what they had personally been dealing with over the course of the pandemic. And I think it's important to note that not everyone answered this question. And I think so some people felt like they didn't have as much of as a personal impact. That may be an assumption that we could take from that. And then we obviously have to acknowledge that this is a small sample, still only 90 people within the framework of the entire community. It's just a very small sample, but I think it helps to inform what people's perspective is that they're bringing to the table as they answer these questions and they observe what's happening in their community. So personal debt and behavioral and mental health definitely overwhelmingly had the greatest support in terms of where support's the wrong word, had the most kind of incidents in terms of the number of people who could say that they personally experienced that. And then I think we really saw, and this is where there was quite a bit of change over the course of the conversation, is access to childcare was an issue that many had personally experienced, and then we started to see that start to impact why it becomes a priority through the course of the conversation. So what I thought would be helpful here is to compare, and it's a lot of information on this, so I'm not going to try to get you to understand every single component of this all at once, and I will share these slides and post them online as well. But again, we saw affordable housing as the top priority for where we should be investing that money. We also saw that kind of one of the biggest changes in terms of people prioritizing that occurred in affordable housing. So the online conversation got people really thinking about affordability and affordable housing, and people changed their opinions there. We also saw childcare and early childhood education see the greatest loss interestingly enough, in terms of kind of going from 6 to 2 in terms of the top thing. So I wonder, where those folks went specifically, but I do think it's interesting to kind of see how that shift happened, but it still is one of the top 3 priorities based on this ranking.
Commissioner
And then-
Bynum, do you want to jump in with a question? I didn't know she had a question about one of the slides, so I wanted to give her.
I do. Thank you very much. I'm just curious because I would ask my fellow team members here, my sense of the affordable housing conversation was included. Sorry, I'm searching for my words. The ability to make my rent/house payment. Does that make sense? So my takeaway from the housing outcome was more than just the city needs to somehow engage builders in building more affordable housing, but housing in general was unaffordable during COVID. And I'm curious what you all think of that. Was my takeaway.
Yeah, I would agree. Like that it was sort of we use the words affordable housing a lot, and I'm not sure we have ever, as a commission, done a good job of defining like what that means and what falls under that category. But I agree. I think it was discussion of the housing market, which is obviously clearly right now in a different place than we were used to. A discussion of people not being able to pay for their house that they already have, and a discussion of there not being enough housing. So I think all of those things came up in discussion in the group that I was in. Commissioner Townsend?
Ditto. Housing in various forms. And I know in my group, I just asked the participants, what do you mean when you say affordable housing? But housing is all its aspects, from whatever the UG could do to promote what they thought affordable housing. I'm scrambling for my notes that I can't find right now because somebody did define it, what that meant to them, but housing in all its aspects. And I was looking at one of the other slides Ms. Ashley first put up. I'm a bit confused. There were so many polls going in. I was wondering how what we did in the group would get to Ms. Ashley so it could be counted, so to speak, because I know that childcare also came up in our group. So I was just wondering how the input from the online groups that participated got to you, other than just the verbal, recording of what was just said. So
yeah, so we the polls. So this is just an analysis of the polls. It's not of the whole conversation. So we had I have the online data and I manually keyed in all the in-person paper surveys as well. So those folks are factored in here from that perspective. Now, when it comes to kind of the final report out from each of those groups, I'm still working on that through that analysis.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those kind of broader topics. So there's obviously going to be huge limitations to these tools because everyone will interpret the words differently. There was a few really interesting comments about on the written surveys, handwritten surveys about, some of these things kind of are so interrelated that I couldn't put one over the other because I still see them as both very important, or maybe one causing the other, right? So if you're having trouble with your mental health, is it impacting other aspects of your life? Obviously, I think there's significant consequences there. So we will have that for you, and it'll be an opportunity for you all as people who directly participated in the facilitation to kind of weigh in and make sure that I've captured what you heard, and so that we can kind of continue to pull that insight forward and also use it as a kind of a continuing process, right? This is not the only community engagement we'll do around the American Rescue Plan, but it is a really important opportunity for us to kind of test the waters a little bit on some of the assumptions that has had to be made over the decision-making process thus far. So I think it's still constructive.
So one last question, when the participants signed in, were they sent a poll to complete before that night?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, not before that night, but when they got on the Zoom, there's a poll that popped up for them to fill out.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
Kathleen?
Okay, so I wanted to just add a little bit of color to the affordable housing issue. So, I know last week I gave a forecast that I expected property tax revenue to grow by 6% in 24 and thereafter. But since then, I don't know, I've been doing a little research, and I'm actually a little worried about the housing market, because in the last 2 months, the mortgage rates have basically doubled. And so it's really going to drive demand down. And I'm actually a little worried that assessed value may actually decline next year, because we may be very well in a bubble. Okay. So, and then there's another issue about rents. And so rents have increased 30 or 50% in some of the larger municipalities in the Southwest. But some indexes have Kansas City at basically the rents being flat compared with last year. So in other words, according to these indexes, and there's a lot of different measurements, so each one is different, but they actually have rents staying the same as last year here in the Kansas City area. And so I don't know, it's a very fluid market area. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's so constantly changing, and so we need to really isolate what it is we're trying to achieve with, instead of just saying, oh, affordable housing. Well, what is it? Is it people that are homeless or without homes, or is it folks that are renting, or is it that they can't get a mortgage, or because there's all kinds of sectors and different objectives that need to be addressed. You really need to narrow it down, is my point. That's all I'm saying.
All right, should I jump back to Ashley's slides and
Yes, please.
the rest of it?
Yeah, I think just to, so following affordable housing, which was ranked as the top priority, behavioral and mental health definitely was kind of the strong second. I do think it was interesting that the online participants, and maybe this is just the nature of the kind of smaller groups and kind of more kind of intimate audio experience. When you're in a room, when there's multiple groups, it's very different than when it's on a breakout group where there's only about 8, 9, or 10 people in the room. That can be tricky to kind of focus in on the conversation, but that's actually where we saw the most change in opinion, was online, which is kind of interesting to see. But there's certainly a lot of again, mental health. I thought this was interesting that the community organizations providing social support I thought that would have ranked a lot higher, particularly in anticipation of the nonprofit application coming up and being available very soon after. So that was kind of interesting. But childcare again, and affordable utilities was kind of the other kind of top issue that came up, and that may, to Kathleen's point, speak to just affordability overall and what that actually means. So I will continue working on and analyzing all of the feedback in the breakout sessions, and provide you with kind of an overview of that for your review, so that if there's anything that I missed or misinterpreted, or you would like to make sure is highlighted, that we have an opportunity to do that. And I think what we will likely do is start to build what the next phase of engagement will really look like. We have some really exciting things happening. And so I'm very excited to kind of bring forward the next round of what that will look like. I think we want to wait till after the DOT talks are going, have finished up at the end of April before we hit people with too much more. I think we don't want to ask too much of our community all at once and really want to make sure that we maximize their involvement and engagement in these processes.
Great. Thanks, Ashley. I'm going to kind of stay with you and maybe with Erica. And I just wanted the committee to get an update on what's going on with the application. We all saw the press release go out, and what does the sort of timeline look like from here on out? What kind of info sessions are happening? Just kind of an update on the whole application world.
Hey, another fantastic turnout, you know, so Ashley did all the right marketing we got, and there were 2 workshops held yesterday and this morning to provide information to applicants on the portal. And the first workshop yesterday, 90 people were on it again, right? About 85. Yeah. This morning, it was supposed to be for UG departments. I think we probably need to mention it during the senior managers meeting and kind of promote it a little bit more, because there were less people on it, about 20, 25, but still fantastic. So yeah. And of course, the web portal's online, it's ready to go. And frankly, Erica could probably tell you if people are entering stuff in already. I don't know. How's it going?
So far, so good. We've received several inquiries about, like clarification of projects and just trying to get more details about how the whole process flows. So there definitely is interest, and we're very excited to see what comes out of the next few days.
Yeah, but Ashley did a great marketing effort, and she introduced everyone, and she led the whole thing. It was fantastic. So
and everything's up on our website, kck.org/ARPA. So we have a video of the first info session because there were a ton of great questions in that. We have a link to the notice of funding availability, both in English and Spanish, and then a link to the application, and then some other FAQs that we've been gathering, and really appreciate iParametrics' help with getting us all of that information, including a one-pager to help us kind of get that information up and running. And as we launch the application on Monday.
Great, fantastic. I feel like that's like a long awaited hurdle that we're finally leaping over. So a big step forward. So the other item I have related to that listed on the agenda is this idea of the weighting criteria. And we had some discussions about whether to weight and what we would give additional weight to. I'll be honest, there wasn't a lot of feedback from your homework folks. I won't call you out by name, but so that brings me to this point of discussion. Like, do we want to weight certain factors differently, or do we just want to wait for those applications to come in, see them all on that level playing field, and make our determinations? There's no requirement that we weight one answer or type of, one piece of that application differently than another. And since I didn't get a lot of feedback, I started thinking, well, maybe there isn't really an appetite to wait in advance of seeing the applications individually. And I think that's fine if this committee just wants to see the applications and not predetermine which one should get priority based on those criteria. So talk to me, Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Yeah, if we want to wait, that's fine. But I would say that inevitably, when they come in, whether it's articulated or not, I think each of us is going to be saying, I like this one over that one for these following reasons. Whether we put that on paper or not, I think that inevitably is going to happen. Did that not happen with, the CARES Act money distribution to some degree?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we're going to be evaluating these applications based on their merits, and that's true regardless of whether we assign a predetermined weight. The only thing that a weighting does for us is bump applications up in our criteria prior to us reviewing the application. So it would just say, it would just sort of prioritize them for us in a different way. But again, I don't think that's required. We can prioritize them as a committee without them being pre-prioritized based on any set of weighting criteria.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Certain things we would seem as cream, so to speak, may rise automatically above others. Yeah. So.
Right. Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I guess I go back and forth on this because on one hand, absolutely, I think if we kind of just let it all, come out and kind of read them, I think it will provide, I guess, kind of an even playing field in a way. But the only thing that I'm just thinking about, especially given, if 85 people showed up, we're about to be hammered with applications, which is a good thing. Erica's saying it, which is a good thing. But I do wonder, if there are 2 or 3 really, really good applications, how do we just make that final decision and say, you met all of the criteria, you've done all of the work, and for this reason, I'm going to give it to organization A and not organization B. I don't know. I'm just kind of talking out loud here. This is not well thought out, but that's just where my mind goes. It's like having something to guide in case of really, really good applications would be helpful, at least for me. But I don't know. I'm still need to do more thinking about it.
I was going to say, Erica, could you talk a little bit about what do we get back? Like, what does this committee get? What's the output that we're going to be reviewing after these applications come in? Kind of describe that to us.
So the applicants are each going to be filling out their personal information at the beginning of the application. But the meat and potatoes is going to be the project application. Well, they will provide to you an outline of the problem that they're trying to solve, what the project would include, the budget, and the budget narrative. So describing how those funds are going to be expended, and also making sure that they have accounted for the necessary resources that they need, especially staffing, to achieve their project on time and on budget. And then also they will be providing any matching funds to you as well, because I know that was one of the pieces that we were very interested in, was multiplying our money as best we can, or, making it stretch as far as we can and do as much good for the community as we can. So each of those pieces will be coming in as a part of each application. We have also asked them to align with the 6 priorities that the commission has laid forward for the county, so that we have a direct tie from each specific project to what we are trying to achieve as a commission and as a community.
So I will say, of the bits of feedback that I did get, that the one commonality that I did find between those bits of feedback was the thought of prioritizing distressed neighborhoods. So I'm going to call on Commissioner Bynum because she has her hand up, and then if we want to discuss on that particular item, we can do that. Commissioner Bynum.
Thanks. I was just going to say, that if they fall within the, categories that we've identified as priorities, then I think we need to consider them. And then, of course, these things that have come to the top from our community sessions. So, if something clearly is outside of ARPA eligibility and outside of what we've previously identified, then we have grounds for not funding that, but otherwise give it a fair shake. And maybe the weighting is the priority categories, and then what the community outreach brought forward. That's all.
Thanks. Yeah, I think the other thing to think about is, we've been using this term weighting and sort of talking about it in more of a sense of sorting the applications as they come in. But obviously this committee is going to be weighing the applications. That's our purpose. That's part of what we're going to be doing. So there's also, on the tail end, as we receive those results, there's nothing to prevent this committee from saying, what we heard in that workshop session was that housing is a priority. Let's sort these so we see the housing related applications first, and let's prioritize them that way. And I think my sense and my feel is that maybe that's the better way for us to go, is to be able to have that conversation as a group, and rather than trying to assign a weight that's sort of like numerical and give points or something like that, to just have us be able to say, let's look at all the housing related ones first. Let's look at all the mental health related, let's take these priority areas that we've heard about, and kind of categorize the applications into those categories and decide whether we want to prioritize them in those categories because we have heard that those are the priority areas. So that's a possibility as well. Kathleen?
Yeah, that's very close to what I was about to say was, we might get 7 or 5 or, different affordable housing related proposals. And so then we want to kind of, well, which ones specifically address the need within that policy area that, and let's focus on that, or perhaps these 2 projects they're really good ideas. Maybe we can get them to partner and collaborate on this kind of different project or hybrid or what have you, like negotiate with them to, I don't know. So, I think we should stay flexible. But given that there's, we can't fund all of them, we're going to have to pick the best and the one that, yeah. So stay flexible.
Thanks, Kathleen. Gail? Commissioner Townsend.
I knew it was me. I'm wondering, from your experience with the CARES Act and from the only experience I've had with grant awards, which I love, favorite time of the year, casino grant. People are happy to get anything. I always look at what they ask for. Can they really accomplish, what they desire to do? And of course, some of the asks are just so outrageous. They ask for more than each of our allocations. But I've learned that some of the more what I would call the professional category grant askers know that they're going to receive help from everywhere, from other places beside us. So I guess to my question is, are we free to give less than what the recipient asks for, or is it an all or none deal?
We are definitely free to give less than they asked for. I mean, some in the CARES Act pot, if I remember correctly, there were some that indicated that they had partnerships and they anticipated getting other funding, or they told us that they were applying for other funding or got federal funding that was going to be paired up with this. So we had some of that information. It sounds like Erica can weigh in, but it sounds like that they've been asked to provide that information too, if they are able to, show some partnerships. But there were still folks that asked for more money than we gave them. And it just, I think, depends on the project. Commissioner Townsend, like if they were buying laptops for, disadvantaged members of the community so they could be able to access things during COVID, we could give them less money, and we just knew that meant they were going to buy less laptops. It just meant there were going to be fewer bought, or if they were a food bank, that just meant there was maybe going to be less food bought. But there are other kinds of programming where it was more clear that if we didn't provide the full funding, they probably weren't going to be able to move forward with the program. So I think to some extent that's probably application by application, depending on what they're asking for. But certainly we are not required to fund them at their full amount any more than we are doing the casino grant program.
Okay, thank you.
Erica, you want to jump in?
Yes, to Ashley's point earlier, there were some categories that people hand wrote in that were there in person. So not all the categories that were available for discussion during the town hall were what people wanted to discuss. It didn't really incorporate everything that's possible. And so I would caution the commissioners to take a look at all that's possible as opposed to just those that we put forward. Although, hearing community voice is absolutely important in what we need to be doing, there are things that are greater than, I think, what we initially did outreach for.
That's a really good point. Yeah, we gave them a list to choose from. So there may be things that fall outside of that list. All right, group, what I'd like to kind of, go ahead, Commissioner Davis.
Just to get some clarity, Erica, could you give us an example? I'm just trying to make sure I'm tracking what you're saying.
So broadband access is one of the pieces that has a greater applicability than just, that last mile from the connection to the house. There's other types of connectivity even within the community that would provide greater awareness, such as like emergency services or alerts, to give us that resilience and that preparedness piece that I think is an opportunity for the entire community that we're just not aware of at this point because we haven't had a chance to talk about that piece.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I want to regroup back around this issue and try to get some sort of solid direction. Is there anybody on the committee that feels absolutely like we need to come up with a weighting system that applies to the applications before they come to us? Shout it out if so. Okay, so what I'm sensing, what I'm feeling is we're gonna let those applications roll in and we're gonna have those discussions with the applications as we get them and decide how to prioritize them as a group when that moment comes.
Yeah, that's inevitable, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Okay. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, I think we're going to move off that issue and that's just how we'll handle it. And I think that is just fine. Okay, we're a little bit behind schedule, but we're getting through it. Every time, guys, always a little behind. So the next topic, we've kind of hit on the fact that we need to have this discussion before, but we haven't really had the discussion. And I'm not really sure how we're going to get to a number, but I think we got to start that discussion sooner rather than later. And that is a discussion of how much money out of what's remaining are we going to award through this application process. And I think we need to, I would prefer that we have that dollar amount in hand before we start considering applications. To get to that, the next topic kind of plays into that. We're going to jump back to that infrastructure topic and kind of finalize that list and have that discussion. But I think there are two parts to this topic, and that's how much money do we want to reserve? And then we had our county discussion the other day with our representatives from Edwardsville and Bonner Springs. We had some discussion, I had some discussion with staff about some of the proposals that were brought forward, and then some of the comments from Sean Peterson in particular, but from those jurisdictions saying, can we just apply through the process? And so I guess what I'm going to bring back to you from that discussion with staff is that maybe the best course of action is for our jurisdictions to apply through the process, because there are things they brought forward that probably aren't ARPA eligible, and the application would help them ferret that out, because the application is going to kind of say, no, you know, that doesn't fit in here, so that can't be funded, which would then give them an opportunity to come up with, to generate other ideas of things that they might want to do that would fit into the ARPA funding opportunity, rather than us just saying, no, that stuff can't be funded and kind of going on our merry way. We want them to have the opportunity to generate ideas that maybe fit better or that seem to be more eligible through our grant process. So it's maybe not the direction I was thinking that originally that we might go, but having seen sort of some of the requests that they brought forward and seeing how some might or might not fit our funding, I guess my recommendation as the chair and my current thinking is that we go back to those jurisdictions and say, we want you to fill out the application. They could, just like any other grantee, they can fill out as many applications as they want to, so they could submit every idea that turns out to be eligible that lets them through the grant process. They could submit 20 applications of the ideas that they have, and let those come through to us for consideration through the process. So I see Commissioner Townsend has her hand up. Go ahead.
I like that idea because it takes the burden off of anyone else, and that application is either at least the first nod, does it fit or not? You know, I mean, for all of them, I think that would be a good idea to do as you suggest. Let them, you know, put their applications in and just follow the process. So.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, and my real fear was I didn't want to just go back to them and say, well, our staff researched all of your ideas and they're not eligible for ARPA, and then just make it sound like we were just closing the door and, well, there's just nothing for you. I want them to have an opportunity to generate ideas that then are eligible. So that's that. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, I think I had thrown out this idea, and there may not be an appetite for it, and that's fine. But the idea of cutting them a check with revenue replacement, that way we don't necessarily have to deal with kind of the you applied and this doesn't really work and this doesn't really fit. My worry with having a city compete for the same funding as a nonprofit, also competing with a UG department, all of those particular entities serve different functions. And in my mind, a city would, because they're serving a greater need, perhaps they would, in my mind, at the very least, have higher priority. The other thing is the politics of this gets really, really sticky of just, you know, I want to do what we can to kind of better that relationship and better the narrative. That doesn't mean we compromise on, you know, doing what we can and having a standard. But to me, it's not giving to a nonprofit, or, you know, it's one thing, but not necessarily helping out some of our cities within our state and county goes into a whole other thing. I don't know. That's kind of my thought process of it. But if there's a way that we could, you know, make sure that they get something, that's all I would ask. Either option would be great for me.
Right. So I think I'm feeling all of those same feelings and concerns, just in terms of like how this feels to those jurisdictional partners. Now, obviously, they did get funding through ARPA directly. So, you know, it isn't a requirement in the sense that in the CARES Act, it wasn't required either. But if they were going to get any funding in the CARES Act, it had to come from us. That was the only way they could get funding. In this case, they did get funding separately. And I guess that part of the reason that I wanted to have this discussion as we're discussing what funds should be set aside for the applications in general is to make sure that if we have a certain appetite, you know, for funding, that we make sure we're including that concept within that. The revenue replacement part, and Kathleen might be getting ready to say this, she has her hand up, is complicated because that has to go through the full commission budget. It has to be allocated through the budget. Now, this committee can make that recommendation, certainly, but that is, once the revenue replacement, as I understand it, Kathleen can correct me, once it kind of went into our general fund, it is now a full commission budget item rather than an ARPA committee item, where the ARPA funds are kind of within our purview at this point. So there's some complication that way. We would have to get full commission buy-in to spend that out of the general fund budget where it's been deposited. And then the third thing I was going to say is, Commissioner Davis, I think this committee is going to decide the priority for those applications. So if this committee says we want those cities to apply and we are committed to awarding them something, then I think, you know, that that's ours to do. It's ours to do or not do from that perspective. If we say we definitely want to fund at least something that they apply for, we can do that. The nice thing about sending it through the application process is that guarantees that it's going to be eligible for ARPA, and it also allows our staff to have the information to track it the way that the federal government is going to require that tracking to happen. So Kathleen, tell me all the things I said wrong. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, no, you're just so much, you're just much more diplomatic and than I am. So, yeah. So, well, I'm sorry, you know, so I am, you know, in charge of the purse here. And I'm just telling you it straight up that the county spends over $70 million a year on services to county residents, including Edwardsville and Bonner Springs. Okay. So, and the city functions that Bonner Springs and Edwardsville provide to their residents is supported by those tax revenues that they collect from their residents. So I'm not seeing why it is Kansas City, Kansas residents should now be, you know, supplementing that. So I understand there's like some pressure, but I'm just saying, you know, that's my position. That's my job, is to tell you, you know, keep all buckets the way but you know, if you all want to provide revenue replacement money, then that would be part of the budget process. Yeah. But even the ARPA allocation is approved by the full commission too. So
That's
you
true.
know, either way, yeah. So I mean, if you all feel that you can get 5 or 6 votes to provide revenue replacement funds out of the county general fund to those cities, then we'll cut the check,
And
but
for,
I'm not a fan.
yeah,
So,
no,
put it that way.
and I appreciate
Yeah.
that perspective. And just for context, I'm only talking about county dollars. I'm
Yeah.
only referencing county dollars. And I
Yeah.
know there's not a lot of money or not as much money there. I am not referencing city dollars at all
Yeah.
when I'm talking about revenue replacement. So I do want to make those
I think,
distinctions as well.
I'm working on the revenue replacement calculation. As you know, I'm just waiting for the audit to get done, so the numbers stop moving. But right now, it looks like the county revenue replacement balance at the end of 2022 is going to be around $5 million. So there is some money, revenue replacement money in the county side, which wasn't what I anticipated back in December, by the way. So.
Sorry, let me unmute myself. I'm trying to look at my 6 different screens at once here. If assuming, and we may sort of bridge 2 discussions here, the next agenda item is to revisit those infrastructure items. And in fact, I might go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I've got an observation about these that we probably should have brought up sooner.
Okay, so here, are you seeing the spreadsheet out of the Teams page, guys?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So down here, this tells us, just so we're all looking at the same thing. If we approve, this is the same slate of items that we looked at previously for the city side, and these are the 3+ votes like we discussed previously. And then for the county side, again, same item, same spreadsheet. I haven't touched it, haven't messed with it at all. Assuming we went forward with all of these infrastructure projects that we had previously all said we were thinking that was the direction we're going, this is what's remaining of our non-revenue replacement funding.
Right.
So this is the bucket we would be drawing out of for our application pool, assuming we don't pull any from revenue replacement, which again is part of that budget discussion. We may be pulling some of that from revenue replacement, but that's a full commission discussion that we have yet to have.
Question, Madam Chair, because I can't see the top. Is that 4.6 city or?
City.
Okay, that's city.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
4.6 is city, the 809,000 is the county side.
Okay, that's what would be left if all of these that you've identified with the 3 or more went forward.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bynum?
Going back to that total, if
And
the
Yeah.
4.6 and the 800,000 would be the total left. I hear what you say as far as outside of the revenue replacement dollars. But this would be the remaining balances for everything else. Whether it's a city department requesting or a nonprofit. Okay, and as far as the chart goes, on these projects, if you could scroll back up to what they are.
Myself over here.
Does this include, do the dollar amounts include any currently budgeted funds already available that would help take down these prices?
no, they don't. No, these are unfunded projects. Yeah. But, so the one thing that I did notice when I was reviewing, and boy, I'm sorry for not remembering, but the one thing I did notice when I was reviewing projects in the WIFIA application, I noticed that one of these was in the WIFIA application. So.
And I think we did have a vague idea that there were potentially grants. Well, we talked about the fact that some of these may be funded by other sources and that if that were the case, we just obviously wouldn't fund them with ARPA. We did have that discussion in this meeting. I don't know that we specifically identified with you, but we talked about that these were still on the table for other potential grant funding. But
Yeah, there's not a lot of grants out there for these particular ones. Yeah.
Which project was that? And I can just kind of highlight it for the
I
group
don't
here.
remember which one it was.
Okay.
It's one of the top
I was gonna
three
say one of the
ones.
top
I'm
three.
so sorry.
That's okay.
But so basically, you know, if we paid for it with ARPA, it would just come off the WIFIA and total once we, you know, because I think there's been based on the meeting we had recently on the stormwater fee, I'm feeling some consensus on that topic. So, you know, if we were to move forward with that rate adjustment, you know, what I'm saying is that model would have to be adjusted to take out the project that we're paying for with ARPA money. And so it would just, you know, they'd probably add in another project to the WIFIA project, to the WIFIA proposal, or reduce the rate. I don't know. It's up to you guys, really. I'm just saying that there's a little bit of a twist there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Davis?
2 questions. Did we decide, and forgive me, Chair, if I'm just blanking on memory, because it's been a while since we've met. Did we decide on that Lombardi Drive? Did we decided to add that in? Was
That's a good question. We had a discussion about it, and what staff said is that although that other project, keyword, that other project was linked to this project, that the Lombardi project could go forward without it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, obviously that's still up for discussion. If we as a group decide that we don't want to move forward with that, that's certainly still on the table, but staff did inform us that it could move forward separately. It just ideally would have been paired with that, you know, highly unaffordable project that it was related to.
Yeah, like the 15 or 17 million dollar one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that does change, not dramatically, but it does change, right? What's left on the city side. The other question, and Kathleen, you might be able to help out here as well. That $9.6 million, that's kind of just there, but it's not revenue replacement, but it's not.
No, it is.
What is that? I guess that's my question.
No, that's the December estimate I had. Back in December, I estimated that revenue replacement would be 9.6 and it only on the city side. And I'm sticking with it because I haven't updated it. That's all. I'm waiting on the audit to stop moving. Within a week or so, we're going to know exactly what that number is. But as I mentioned earlier, that I think that actually on the county side, there's going to be 5 million in that cell where there's 0 right now. Okay, so these numbers are going to change very soon, and then you'll have more money to spend available. And so actually one thing I think that your committee should decide is, hey, look, do we really want to roll this revenue replacement into the grand budget process, or would you all like to just go ahead and start making some recommendations on how to allocate the revenue replacement money within your purview? I mean, it may make a lot of sense because you're closer to all the, you know, otherwise it's just going to kind of get buried in the grand, huge scheme of things of the budget. And so I'm just saying, it probably might be.
Yeah, Kathleen, that's what's going to be my next comment is, I think the awkwardness is, it's never been fully or clearly delineated to us what role we're going to have in that revenue replacement. And my recommended role is that we make recommendations on how to spend that for inclusion in the full commission budget. So I'd like to see this committee make the recommendation for the full commission's adoption. You know, there's several of us on here, so we have a little bit of clout. And I think, like Kathleen said, we are closer to some of those issues. And have had a closer experience in identifying those things that we might want to get done, but that don't fall within ARPA. So Commissioner Davis, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would give you more money on the county side to spend on affordable housing or what have you, you know?
Sure.
So,
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I am slightly perplexed here because there's the $9.6 million, which is still kind of revenue replacement. And then I see the $14 million,
Well,
but
yeah,
then we're spending 17 million. So I guess how much did we have of non-revenue replacement dollars on the city side?
well, that's row 21. So 17 is the total projects that you're looking at. 22 is how much money you got to spend. The 4 is 17 minus, well, 22 minus 17. Okay. And then if you add in revenue replacement, which is line 21, right, which I told you is probably going to change. If you add the 4 plus the 9.6, you get 14. See, that's what that's how this math is working.
So I thought we had a large chunk of money in revenue replacement that was not in the 9.6 million.
No, that's it. I mean, that's how much revenue replacement money is left. Okay. I mean, yes, revenue replacement was a lot. It was over $40 million between the two funds. But we really needed the revenue replacement because our fund balances were really suffered because of the pandemic. So this line, row 21, is what's left. And like I said, I think that it's going to be more. I'm just working on the estimate.
Trying to find the.
Yeah, I am confused. I'm
Okay,
so
well,
sorry.
Yeah, what other? Yeah, keep asking me questions on.
I'll explain. No.
Hold on. This might help a little bit. This is from our website.
Oh, all right.
Right,
So,
revenue replacements, all the green.
Yeah, so right here it says that we deposited $29.7 million. That's just deposited. It has not been spent. It has just been allocated.
No, that's not what that means. It means that it got deposited into as a revenue in the city and all the city funds and then all the county funds. And understand, it's not just the general funds. It's all the funds that are city and all the funds that are county. That it got deposited as a revenue because had we not, I mean, we really did need revenue replacement in these funds. So.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So because they were deposited, now they count as revenue, which means that this committee no longer has access to that money anymore. Right. Okay.
It's not
unless
strictly
you all
ARPA funds.
seize the day and decide to make recommendations on the remainder. Well, what's remaining is this. Well, right now it's just 9.6 on the city side, but
that makes way more sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the 9.6 will change after the audit, gets done. We're still working on it. So,
Commissioner Townsend.
Okay, well, after that, I need to go back to the project list, for lack of a better name.
Okay, let me get you there.
And just ask again the fundamental question of, okay, can you go back down a little bit more? Okay, right there. Do we have $17,474,528 to spend if we decided that are ARPA funds?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you have 22.12 million to spend.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. So now that we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and of course, as always, realizing we have less money than we would like to have. It never seems to go the other way, really. What are your thoughts on this list that we came up with? Do we need to reevaluate? I think one thing that I meant to pull before this meeting and I didn't is how much we allocated through that CARES Act process. And I don't know if anybody from staff happens to know that off the top of their head, but it'd be just maybe a comparable for us. It might be floating around in one of these spreadsheets. I might be able to find it real quick, but
37 million in total. So
Well, for CARES Act, how much do we allocate through that application process for CARES Act? Does anybody know?
Well, there was 37 million. Yeah, there is a PowerPoint in there that talks about it.
Let's see.
Mhm.
But,
And
I mean, it just might be something for us to
What-
kind of compare this application process to that one and get an idea of what,
when you say application process, you mean the nonprofit?
right.
Oh, yeah, there's a PowerPoint in there. I'll look it up. Okay.
Okay. So I mean, I think the question, like I said, these two discussions that are on our agenda are kind of overlapping because what I need for us to determine, and we don't have to determine it today, although I do think it's our next big item, it's our next big hurdle, is to determine how much we're allocating through this application process. And that is sort of determinative or related to how much are we allocating through the infrastructure process, and are we still on board with the list we originally developed? They're obviously related because if we spend, just spend down all the money, then we just have to know that that's the direction we're heading.
Or you can just decide to use this application process to spend down all the rest of the money. Just
And
all of
that's that's a possibility. I mean, we can
Yeah.
just say, hold on, I gotta page down again. We can just say we're spending down the rest of this money in the application process. That is completely a decision this committee can make. And part of that discussion, I think, is in our sort of next steps. So again, maybe we don't make the decision today, but I need us to kind of decide how we want to decide what that looks like as we go forward. Because one thing that staff wants to bring to our attention is that if we do spend down all of this money through the application process, then we don't have maybe the opportunity to set aside match money for other grant opportunities. However, it could be this committee's recommendation to the full commission that we set aside revenue replacement money to act as match money for the other federal grants that are out there, because we know most of these federal grants are requiring a match, and we want to make sure we can fund that match ideally somehow other than out of our regular budget. We don't want to be like, hey, we got to lay you off because we got to pay this match money. Like, we want to make sure that we have another way to allocate that funding. So one option is that we make a recommendation to the full commission that the match money for those other grants be set aside out of the revenue replacement dollars, which then does free us up to say, we're going to spend the whole rest of this money in those applications. I think the third part of that discussion is just that we had previously talked about allocating money specifically for housing. I think we're going to get a lot of applications that relate to housing related issues just based on the feedback we got in our workshop. I think that's pretty likely. So I think the third sort of meeting of that discussion for this committee is, are we setting aside money specifically for housing, or are we just anticipating that we're going to get applications that will spend money on housing related issues through the application process? I've talked enough, Commissioner Townsend.
Oh, my hand was still up. Well, okay.
Well, you don't have to, but
Since it's just, to sort out what I'm thinking, I'm probably still confused. In identifying, when we did this Queen, King of the World exercise, part 1, part of my rationale, and a good part of it had to do with the presentations. We saw the need, and that nobody else but us can do these things, which is a factor when you were talking about waiting in part 2 of the Queen of the World that I mentioned somewhere in there. So who could do this but us? And I remember particularly the logistics presentation and somewhat the infrastructure as well. No other group but us can do this. So I'm kind of okay with spending the 17. Now, in terms of the match, my understanding from what I'm hearing today is it might be possible we don't spend all 17. Let's say we decide it's our recommendation to go forward with this list. We may not spend all 17 because there may be other offsetting dollar opportunities, right?
That's a possibility that some grant comes along, that funds up something else on this list. That is a possibility.
And then the other recommendation that you just mentioned was what? To take this some revenue replacement amount and use that as,
Yeah, so the other federal grants, non-ARPA grants, other federal grants that our staff is applying for, all of them require some percentage of match. So we have to pay part of each of those projects in order to be eligible for the grant. And so staff wanted us to consider as a committee whether we set aside ARPA funds to act as the match dollars. So not to fund the whole project, but to fund the 25%, let's say, that we have to fund as a government. So I think for discussion for this committee is, do we do that with the ARPA funds, or do we make that recommendation to the full commission that we use the revenue replacement money and set aside part of that for those match dollars? And staff would have to do some work deciding what that amount, what that number is that would be appropriate to set aside as a match possibility.
that sounds reasonable, using revenue replacement as our bank, so to speak, for the match part. I could see that.
Okay.
Because if we pull it out of the 4.6, I don't know what we'd have to give away through this other application process.
Great. Okay, so I want to try to draw us closer to a close at least, so we can try to get to a closing point today and be ready to move forward in our next meeting. So 3 things I want to try to wrap up. First, is anybody, how do people feel about the county jurisdictions? And are we feeling that moving forward, letting them go through the application process, or encouraging them really to go through the application process, is the way to go? Or are there those who are strongly opposed to that and would rather go a different route?
I'm okay with letting them go through that process. I think it would be more transparent. Or as transparent as any other process.
Okay. And I'm going to work to communicate that back to those jurisdictions. Item number 2. So because there's a wrap up in how we decide this infrastructure with how we decide the amount that we want to fund through this application process, it's difficult to say, yes, we're going to do either of those right today and make a decision. So I think I'd like to ask you guys to do another King or Queen of the World assignment and shoot me an email and tell me how much, if you were King or Queen of the World, how much would you allocate through this application process? And again, it's just for me to get an idea of how far apart we are as a committee. So this spreadsheet that I have open and shared right now is the spreadsheet that is in our drive. It's the one that says revise. So it's on our Teams if you need to refer back to it. You can put that you want to allocate the whole amount. That's completely fine. If there's a lesser amount that you would like to allocate, or that you would allocate if you're a King or Queen of the World, please let me know that. Again, it's not that I'm going to make a decision by email, but it'll just give me an idea of how far apart or close together we are as a committee, so we can get the discussion moving a little more quickly. Commissioner Davis?
Thank you. Just for clarity, the amount that we give you, is that only going to be, in this case, from line 19, where it's just, non-revenue replacement dollars that are left, or can we also include revenue replacement dollars and the dollars that are left?
You can also include revenue replacement dollars. Again, we would just have to make that recommendation to the full commission, which I am fine with leading that charge. So if you allocate more than is in the yellow highlighted area, sorry, I keep looking away because I got it on the other screen, but if you allocate more than is in the yellow highlighted area, I'm going to assume that you intend for that to be revenue replacement. If you want to note that for me, that's fine, but I'm going to assume if you allocate more than what's highlighted on line 19, that you're anticipating using revenue replacement.
Okay. Is it possible for us to split and say, maybe I want to do 3 million from the city, but I want to do 2 million just from revenue replacement for the city? Is that also, just having some example?
You're King of the World, Commissioner.
Okay, all right.
King of the world, yes.
Sure. I know.
Yes, no, absolutely. The more creative the idea, probably the better for us to have some conversation. So you're King of the World. So yep, if you want to, however you want to split it out, that's fine. And then if you will also include in that same email if you have thoughts about moving forward with the infrastructure, if you're like, yes, gung ho, we should follow exactly what we came up with in this activity we did previously, I'm good with the slate of projects, let me know that. If you're having second thoughts and you think we need to further consider, just drop that note in the email as well. Because again, it'll just give me an idea of a feel for what we're feeling as a committee so that I can put things on the agenda that need to be discussed and move us forward. Okay, and then next time we'll look at those items again with the feedback that you're going to provide me. That'll also give us an idea of what this match money set aside situation might look like. And then that all sort of wraps into whether there are other things we want to allocate funds to in the discussion of their revenue replacement. So next time is going to be all about the money as we try to figure out what those little buckets look like, or littler than we ever thought they'd be, right? All right, team. Any other questions, comments? I'll shoot out an email with that homework summarized again. Just I know if you're like me, you kind of live by your inbox, so it'll be in your inbox to remind you that that's out there. And we'll just continue to try to walk this forward. Good. All right.
Good.
Well, as always, we got off schedule, but we managed to not keep you here for an extra hour. So I always call that a victory.
Yeah, here.
One of our attendees is asking, when is the next subcommittee meeting? And I honestly could not tell you off the top of my head. I'm not even sure if I have it scheduled. Does anybody from staff know if we scheduled it? And if not, the answer is, sir, that we will host it on the website, on the calendar. If you go to the main YCO KCK website, and there's sort of that calendar and it shows our meetings and some events that are coming up, you'll find it there as soon as we know.
And we are trying to, I know that Lisa was working on trying to find a regular cadence too, to make it as easy for people to track when the next meeting's coming.
Right.
So
We're trying to
that
get
scheduled.
to where it's like every other Tuesday or something like that. So ideally that'll be the situation going forward. So I apologize, we don't know that date right now. We don't know it either. So
Yeah,
you're in the
no,
same boat with us.
there is one scheduled, yeah.
Is there one? Tell me,
Yeah,
Kathleen.
yeah, it's I'm looking right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's oh shoot. Well, maybe not. I'm so sorry. I thought, yeah, I'm looking at my calendar. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it now. I'm pretty sure there is one scheduled. but
Maybe there's
I'm
one we
not
were working
seeing it.
on. We'll get you the info. We will.
Yeah.
We'll make sure as soon as we know and have a date solidified, we'll get it out there for everybody. I apologize that we haven't gotten it solidified yet, but working with all of our schedules is a bit of a nightmare, as Lisa would tell you. All right. Anything else?
Hmm.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.